thing. And one of my friends who I was working with said that he had a buddy that just turned his $6,000 investment into $12,000. And I was like, no, that's a scam. We always recommend downloading the list directly from us because we've vetted all the information, right? We have the quality control throughout that process. And like what you mentioned, it's not just the pricing, it's the filtering, it's the formatting, and just having a ready to send list.
Hey everybody, welcome to the King Show podcast. Today for this data guys, especially land investors, but real estate investors who can appreciate and understand that it all starts with the data. I've got some guys on here, the founders of Prycd, that man, between these two, they've got an extensive amount of data and analytics, and even one of them here, these guys were doing AI before AI was cool, right? We'll get into that, but they were saying AI before anybody knew what it was. So they're the founders of Prycd. I'm going to bring on Max and Ryan. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hey Travis, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, well, I want to give a backstory because, like I say, I'm interviewing a lot of people. Obviously, a ton of land investors. I've been trying to interview, real estate investors, interview founders, and then even sprinkle in some athletes here and there. And we were chatting before the show, and you guys check all three. Both of you check all three of those boxes with your backstory. So I know a lot of people know you guys from your current company, Prycd. But why don't you kind of life rewind us and kind of tell us, how you got into this, but also maybe the athlete thing. We were small talking before the show about youth sports and travel ball.
Sure. Yeah, I can go first. So my name is Max Edson, like Travis said, one of the co-founders of Prycd. But long before that, I grew up in Southern California and really got into sports early just from my parents. And weirdly enough, got into hockey. And so that's when the Wayne
in
Gretzky
Southern California.
Yeah. So that's when the kind of the Wayne Gretzky era was coming through and he's playing and everyone was getting into it. So that's really, I fell into that. I did a lot of other sports growing up, but hockey was really my main driver. And so parents drove me around everywhere, all the travel leagues, everything else. And that really started early on, just kind of like the competitive nature of, just competing and winning and just playing and having fun out there. So that took me all the way up to college. So played at the Air Force Academy where I met Ryan there. And so played there, unfortunately got hurt at the time. And when I got hurt, and I'm sure kind of Ryan has a similar story and he can kind of tell you more, but it kind of hit me where I didn't really know anything else besides hockey at the time. And I still had my competitive feeling that I wanted to compete in something, but I didn't really know or have an outlet to do that. And so that's really where I started to get into just investing in general at the time. So found out about the stock market and really started to get curious about that and went to that. At the same time, our school was hosting some other entrepreneurial type events at the time. And I know Ryan and I did one together and we ended up coming in second place and won some money from it. And that was really the thing that sparked just the entrepreneurial journey. And so
you guys are playing together then, like you guys are teammates.
Yes. Yeah.
At this point. So you know each other prior to kind of entering this contest together. And
in the hockey world, it's pretty small. As you start getting up the ranks, you play high school and then you play travel hockey and you play in what's called junior hockey in between high school and college. And so you play against each other there. And then once you get into college, obviously, then you're playing and meeting up every day. So we went through that together.
And Ryan, where'd you grow up? Because you're probably doing the same thing. You're probably playing travel hockey and stuff too, or no?
Yeah, Max and I have almost the same story. I'm also from California, just the northern part of California. Grew up playing, travel hockey just like Max, flying way too far across the country to find good hockey since,
Yeah.
in the early 90s, California wasn't exactly a hockey hotbed. But yeah, played, did high school hockey, juniors, and then, met Max my sophomore year at the academy. Max actually my freshman year, his supposed sophomore year, because Max actually went a year before me. But yeah, so we kind of have very, very similar parallels in our paths to where we got. And then, he branched into more of the investing and financial, mastery, if you will. And, I went the programming route from there.
Well, and so you guys, we were just talking before the show, before we hit the record button, about you kind of the appreciation you have for your parents, doing all this travel hockey, right? Because this funny thing you say that Southern California. So I'm recording this show tomorrow. By this time, we'll be on the road. We might even be there, I guess. We'll be going to Southern California for my 16-year-old, my oldest, has a baseball tournament. And then if the kids didn't have a week of school in between, we'd probably just stay there because the following week, one of my other boys has a basketball tournament in Southern California. So this is how crazy it is for those that aren't in, don't have their kids in travel sports. If you're just playing local, like, it's nuts. You're always going somewhere, always doing something, especially if you got siblings doing it. But I don't think my kids are old enough to appreciate it or us yet. But I think in hindsight, they'll go, wow, that took a lot of effort, and more than that, took a lot of logistics, right?
Yeah, I know. I didn't fully appreciate it at the time either when I was that age. But as I get older, it's just looking back on it. Wow, I can't believe they, first of all, fought LA traffic all the time, going to and from practice and spending hours in the car. And then, traveling to whether it's.
I think it's everything when you're a young man, right? And you leave the house. Like, I remember even kind of like not even thinking about how the clothes got folded and got set in my room or on the dresser, right? And then you move out of the house and you start, wait, this is a lot of work, right? All this laundry, all this stuff. So that's awesome. So you guys you met at the academy, you're playing hockey. And then there's like an entrepreneurial event or a competition?
Yeah, we ended up, someone put together an event for us to basically participate in. And it was against all other colleges around like the Colorado area. And it was hosted by Fidelity. And they're just looking for new ideas essentially to, have people come to their platform early and then stay longer. And so that was our first taste of just a little bit of true entrepreneurship, coming up with an idea and then pitching that idea to them and kind of getting a feel for what that looks like and what it takes to just kind of come up with an idea.
Yeah. And then what happens after? So you guys win, you say you win or you get second place in this?
We got second place. We came up with just an interesting idea for basically them to create a mobile gaming app. And so they would create a gaming app, and then instead of people purchasing with, in for clothes or, whatever they buy in those like in-game little credits, instead of that being a sunk cost to the user, it would basically go into an investment account for them. So we ended up coming in second for that to pitch that idea.
Yeah, I think the premise was like, how do you bring health and wealth to like a single concept? And so, the idea was that the app would engage users to move around and, be active. Kind of like, I think at the time, like Pokemon Go was like all the craze, right? This is like 2016. So
you don't even need to timestamp this. I think it's still all the craze.
Yeah, it probably still is. Yeah. But this was like right when it was coming out, and it was just a huge, huge deal. And so we kind of took that idea of, having users get out and be active, but then, their sort of in-game experience was revolved around, investing and putting money towards like an investment account of some kind.
And so you're focused on programming at this time, Ryan? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I was getting my undergrad in computer science at the time. So the competition itself didn't have require any actual development. It was more of a concept kind of thing. So it was just, write up like what it would do and how it would do it, but not actually it was just like a one-day thing. So it was not enough time to actually build anything.
Yeah. But what it did do is that we came up with the idea, they loved it, but then really didn't pursue or do anything with it. And then so we tried to take that on ourselves. And at the time, I think there was a total of like 5 of us that pitched the idea as kind of a team. One person fell off early, and then, or maybe 2 fell off early. And then it was me, Ryan, and one other person. we ended up kicking out the other person before we even really had a company started and went to pitch. We went to like, Northwestern Mutual to kind of get the investment side, and then try to call up different gaming companies and create an actual model and everything. So we were kind of all over the place, but it was really our first taste of how do you really take from idea to creation as far as an app or a business goes. And so we did it totally wrong. And honestly, it was a big idea, but it was a lot of like fun learning stuff to just kind of get a taste of what that felt like, at least.
Well, that's what I think in the beginning too, like say you are all over the place trying to find traction, right? But sometimes it's like the exposure, going through the exercise, the growth, the stuff you didn't know how to do. Now you've pitched, now you've done this, right? Just the second go around is always more familiar. All right. So you guys kind of do that. You figure out it's like, I can't think of a good boy band or something. You guys kick out the other members. It's down to you two, right? You got it down to you two. And then you go, okay, now we don't have to give up all that equity share, split it 5 ways. We got 50% each. Now let's start something. So we got 50% of something that has legs, right? Yeah. So what's the next venture?
I think after that, we kind of started doing our own things. I know I started looking into more just investment little strategies and models on my own as far as just stock market stuff. trading penny stocks and whatnot. And then Ryan, I know, did a few other.
Yeah, I did a couple of just like independent contractor ventures, building mobile apps for a couple of companies that just did kind of various oddball things. Actually built an app for our school my senior year that was kind of cool. It was like an Uber Eats pickup concept because our school was located on an Air Force base, so you couldn't call Grubhub or DoorDash because they couldn't get on the base. So we kind of
is this Colorado Springs you were talking about?
Yeah, this is in Colorado Springs.
Been there, yeah. We've been there with the kids, taking them to the base before. So all right.
Yeah, it's gorgeous up there.
Yeah.
So you develop an app. That's awesome. So you actually develop a functioning app that works.
Yeah, we had a functioning app. I think there was 4,000 students and we had 1,200 users by the time I graduated. And it was only an Apple, iOS only app. So we felt like it was a pretty good result. I got an A- in the class. I like to tell people that I built this what I felt was a cool app and got an A-.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh no, that's fantastic to take something from concept to reality and then have that many users, right? Reporting bugs to you or giving you feedback.
Oh yeah. I would leave class in the middle of class because there was a bug and you'd have to go down to we partner with like Subway and Dunkin' Donuts, and I'd leave class midway through and be going helping like a Subway employee because the app wasn't loading something properly on their display, and I'm behind the counter while people are ordering. It was something.
Well, I can attest to that too.
I can too, right? I can fast forward. I can too. I fast forward to when you guys start Prycd. We'll get to that, right? I remember in the very early days, because I know I have to be one of your, very early adopters, right? Like using your software and saying, "Hey guys, I think I would really benefit if you'd add a drop down here or this filter there." And you guys would like text me like, "Okay, pulling over, turning on the hotspot, adding the drop down." Like an hour later, you're like, "All right, log out, log in." And it should be live.
I think
like, holy smokes.
It sounds like a better story than it is, but I think it's just poor planning because we decided after everything we built after a year, we were like, let's launch this app and make it public. And it was the day I was moving cross country from Alabama to Las Vegas. And it definitely pulled over quite a few times on the side of the road with my U-Haul to try and help debug issues.
Hopefully that third guy you kicked out wasn't a project manager or something, right? I could have pointed that out to you.
It was way before this. Yeah.
Well, this is why
you guys launch on a move when you're moving.
A few companies.
Launch day and move day are the same.
we tend to do that. Just go for it on crazy days. And
so how did you guys come to start Prycd, your current software that you have?
Yeah. So kind of over time, like we both tried a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different things. And throughout this whole process, when you graduate from the Air Force Academy, you incur at least a 5-year commitment in the Air Force. So like we're also in the Air Force at this time as well. But just because, we were doing entrepreneurship stuff, that we really wanted to start something while we were in to see if we could take that, as our commitment starts to get to the end of it. But how it started really is that I was looking for something else at the time as far as like an investment thing. And one of my friends who I was working with said that he had a buddy that just turned his $6,000 investment into $12,000. And I was like, no, that's a scam. It's like, I'm not doing that. I need to at least talk to this person though. And it happened to be one of my good friends now who really kind of taught us land investing. And that's what he was doing. He was flipping land. And I learned a lot from him. If whoever people know in the show, Brian McCarthy, he was the one that really I first got introduced into the land investment segment, and he taught me a ton and showed me how it's actually done. And I realized that it's a legit thing to do. And so I tried it out initially this was probably back in, I don't even know, 2018 or 19 or so, and tried it out with 2 other friends of mine. And it really went kind of horribly wrong, to be honest with you. It was a painful process to try to find property records where there was enough in a certain area at a price point that I wanted to go to. And the other 2 weren't as committed as me at the time to kind of really jumpstart a business. And so it was just not a great thing, but it really ended quickly for me there. I was like, I'm not doing this again. There's too many manual processes. And then Ryan and I did a couple other things after that, but then that never really worked either, to be honest with you. But probably a year or so after that, probably, I think it was in 2019. Then,
it was 19.
Yeah. We decided to kind of figure out what else to do next. We've probably had about 5 different things that failed at that time. or just wasn't really what we wanted to do. And we made a list of everything that we wanted to try next. I put down land flipping again there we had a list of, a bunch of things on there, whether it's Facebook, or Amazon, selling on Amazon or anything else. But we decided on land flipping, and I told them, it's like, if we do this, it has to be automated. There's no way we can do this manually. Ryan basically took that and was like, yep, we can do this. And so we drew out an entire model on a sheet of paper that I think we still have somewhere of what we wanted to do. And this was just for an internal model for our own personal land investing at the time.
So this is this is not, you haven't even seen the opportunity or thought of having
Correct. Yeah,
Max, I actually found the paper I think it was at that burger place in LA.
Yeah, we stopped at a random burger place to kind of figure out what we wanted to do next. And it was a list of like 10 different things on there. And we made pros and cons of each. And then after we summed up, we made little numbers of
we ranked them and everything.
And land investing was at the top. So you're like, all right, I guess we'll give this a try. And so,
just to kind of interject and share with people, at this time, the industry's matured a lot, and there's a ton of people brought different skill sets into it and kind of put their own spin on it. But basically what I'm saying is there weren't a lot of tools out there. I'm forever grateful for everybody who introduced it or played a role, and because I took 4 or 5 courses. I felt like I needed to take 4 or 5 to kind of fill in gaps and have everything I needed to move forward. But at the same time, that gave me that awareness of land and land flipping as a model, but how it was actually being done, the workflow felt like dated. Even when I started, I'm going, wait a minute, compared to some of the tools I'm using in the workforce. And I'm like, this seems like kind of it seems like a repeatable process that works. Obviously, I'm not skeptical, I believe. But even the spreadsheets and things, the way people were teaching it and showing, I'm like, they're not even teaching macros or, there was no type of automation. Like you're saying, it was completely manual, like pulling raw data, doing actual manual mail merges between Excel or CSV files and Word docs, right? Like everything was just insanely manual at this time. So you guys right away recognize okay, we've got to automate this. So much of this is repetitive, right?
Yeah. Our initial sort of automation wasn't even really around the list, the data generation process. It was actually around what we have on our research page now, which is sort of the market analysis, right? Like our intent was not so much how do we automate list pulling? It was, how do we find out of, 3,000 plus counties, which one we want to target? And so to do that, we had to go out and seek the data to find that information. So that was where we the basis for getting a lot of our, county ranking data, and then all the comp data, obviously, to look at, the current market in those areas. And so that was, it's funny, the initial premise had nothing to do really with pulling a list, pricing the data. It was just, market research. And then
that's the genesis, right? That's the secret sauce, or the important part of being able to pick new markets and move into new markets, is using that, like you guys do, that data-driven approach, like comp data-driven approach, right? So that precedes all of the list pulling and the mailer and everything, because what used to be taught back then was kind of this, you send these test campaigns, right? Meaning you just spend a lot of money on marketing and spray and pray and hope that it hits a good county. But the reality is, you guys kind of brought a research tool in to where internally first, where you're going, okay, what are the days on what are the sold to for sale, right? What's the absorption? I want to pick a market where there's a demand, right? Not just throw a dart at a map, which it kind of felt like was going on. Or honestly, mostly what was being taught at the time through all courses was what I call the copycat method today, right? You're just going on Zillow or land.com and seeing where other people are working and what they're selling for. And then you're sending out offers for half that or a quarter that, right? But you guys kind of decide to automate this and build an internal tool to help you with market selection.
Yeah, because there's a lot with land investing too. So it's very simple. You say we flip land, but what does that actually, entail, right? So like Ryan said, the researching, and we broke it out into all of its different segments. So you have the researching, you have the list pulling, which really, also encompasses how many records do you actually want to pull. And then if you want to do blind offers where you're sending out actual offer prices and to purchase property, you need to price each record in there. And then you have to kind of segment that out and then clean up your list so it's actually ready to send. And at the time, really only direct mail marketing was the go-to method too. Yeah. So how do you get it cleaned up to have a template to send out? So yeah, we broke it out into that, and then kind of little by little try to make it for ourselves. So it's just automating that process. And Ryan, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, that so one of the reasons, our website is actually kind of foundationally built around this idea of a county and an acreage, right? Because that's how our research and all of our sort of analytics got started. Was we were looking for a county and an acreage to target. And so, you look at like when you do a search through the site, even now, right? Just because that's just the genesis of it, is all the results, everything is county and acreage, segmented. And, so then that's how, our research is broken up, all those kind of things. So it's kind of lends to why, things now look they look a lot the same, but we've tried to build around that core framework.
Yeah. Well, and so much that's most people are pretty familiar listening, but those that aren't, that's kind of how the data is presented to us, right? Is essentially these data resellers are kind of buying the county assessor, right? Tax rolls, right? And then formatting it so that it doesn't look different from one state to another, right? And then kind of curating or aggregating everything and then reselling it in a standardized format where you can pull a list from any county and it should look the same, right? And so with those lists, like you're saying, you're basically you're taxed at the county level, right? So the assessor, that's how they're taxing you. So that's why, and I think that's where it all starts, that kind of residue of like how to pick a county. Why do we start with the county, right? Because that's where you used to start, as you reach out to the county. And this is even before there was like single user licenses, right? Where you were actually reaching out to counties and they would mail you discs or send you TXT or PDF files or whatever. Because when I got into it, that's what it was. It was like you were getting tax delinquent lists from counties and you're reaching out direct is how I started. Before, there was plenty of list providers out there, but none of them with the filter that allowed you to have like land specific or like unimproved vacant land. There's dozens of them for houses and scores of them nowadays. Back then, not much for land, right? So you guys start doing this and then you start using your own tool to do marketing to acquire land to flip.
Yeah, we actually, the funny thing was we started doing this, and we had learned our lesson from a recent project we worked on where we didn't get user feedback early. We kind of built this whole application in a vacuum, just Max and I, and we went back and forth for probably 2 years or at least a year and a half, just only us doing stuff. And then we built this very mature application that had no input from outside users. And so with that project, when we started to try and go to market and sell it, people either didn't want it or didn't understand it, or it didn't really capture, what a user might want for what we were trying to accomplish. So for this, project early on, before we really had anything other than just a script that ran, a function, we emailed investors we knew in the space and just kind of gave them some inputs and, asked for some inputs and gave them some outputs and just tried to get an idea of what they thought, was this information useful? What else could make it useful? Does the analytics that we're providing match kind of what your expertise is in a given market? And folks kind of were like, this is cool. Like, what is this? Like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this for? Is this like a website? Can I access this kind of thing? So we ironically went from, this is something we're going to use internally, but we're going to get feedback on, to this might be something we want to point externally and, have let other people access. And so there was kind of like a mindset shift at that point where we thought, this actually might be better suited as an outside tool, but it wasn't quite ready for that yet.
Well, I'm sure lots of iterate, right? From being an internal to where you go, okay, how do we stand this up and make this like a public facing self-serve, right, solution? There's a big gap between those two, right? Building your own internal Python script or whatever you're doing. Right?
Yeah. It's a huge, to build a production server and a website. We actually threw together like a concept website to get some more validation on. And I want to say this is probably March, April time of 2020. And it didn't really, take off. Nothing really happened. We hadn't promoted it publicly. We were actually trying to, partner with a couple of people in the space, and that sort of fell through. And this is obviously, right when COVID was starting. And so, we kind of went away from it for a few months. We were focused on other things. I had just moved again. And so we were doing stuff, but we had notifications on the website, where it would say, hey, so-and-so logged in, so-and-so, did a search, et cetera. And every day or every other day, we would see a couple people go to it and a couple of people search. And that went on for like a month until, Max and I talked and we're like, this seems like people kind of are still going to it we weren't marketing it. It was just there. It existed. And we were like, should we maybe finalize, put together at the time, there was no integration with First American Data Tree. So you couldn't pull a list. It was just sort of like, hey, here's our data. Here's some information. We were like, should we, finalize that integration? Should we launch this out? And so that's what we ended up doing. And, we went to Justin with Casual Fridays and said, hey, could you help us get this product out there? Can you help put the word out? And so that was June of 2020. And that's kind of how we, quote unquote, launched. It was just sort of almost like coming back to like, this seems like this is still kind of a thing. So let's try it out.
I just interviewed Justin earlier today, guys. I'll share that. Justin was just a guest earlier.
Yeah. So, you have to ask him that story.
Yeah, Casual Fridays. That's what I said. What company are we highlighting or mentioning today? It's like, are we doing Casual Fridays? Are we doing Plum Investments? Are we doing the fund?
Yeah.
So big shout out to Justin. Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys kind of touch base with him. Does he have the podcast at this time? Does he have the Casual Fridays podcast?
Yeah. So we actually went on there pretty quickly after we had launched the product to talk about it and what it does. So that was extremely helpful for us to get going. We obviously have all the thanks in the world for him for helping us get there. Because at the time, we were not, it wasn't a thing. So, he was kind of taking a risk of promoting this product that he had obviously used and tested out and liked, but it didn't have, the validation of, hundreds and thousands of investors using it and building it to what it is now.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know I found you guys real early and when you tied that, that data source as a data tree reseller to your front end, your web app, right, that you guys built. The first time I used it, this is how into land I am though, right? Like I almost had shivers, and I'm not even joking. Because I spent so much time on these campaigns and in spreadsheets. 5 to 8 hours a campaign, and the scrubbing that you guys built in, where you guys kind of have, I tell people, some people are unfamiliar with Prycd. They think of Prycd as a data source that gives you essentially a column with an estimated value, right? And then you can have whatever offer price percent you need. What a lot of people that haven't used the product are unaware of, kind of on the bookends of that I would say that's useful to like everybody in the industry. If like maybe you're not sending blind offers, right? Is the research page you guys put together with the searching counties with all these different filters, stack ranking counties, from days on market to sold to for sale ratios. So the research page, and then the other book, and I'd say is like the scrubbing, right? Where I'm saying, hey, what do I want scrubbed out or removed from my list before it hits my inbox, or, not downloading the list like the old days, and then me working through and deleting all the blank rows, the foreign owners. Maybe you are or aren't mailing corporate owners, right? So all of that manual stuff I used to have to do, that's where I was blown away and immediately, saw the value in my workflow. Was like, oh my gosh, you guys just saved me 5 to 8 hours a campaign, right? And that's not even like the pricing piece of it, because at that time I was still too paranoid to let the pricing part of it go, right? But the research and then the scrubbing itself, it was just it was really for my tech stack and what I was doing at the time, it was a big, big find. But I recognized it immediately when I came across what you guys were doing, and it's obviously blown up since then.
Well, and when we launched too, if you use the product now, we have obviously multiple pricing schemes, and we've really kind of drilled in our geo pricing, sort of our property centric pricing idea. But when we launched, we just had sort of a county estimate, so we would just take all the comps in a county and an acreage range and come up with a model for that. And that was the only way you could price the data. And so a lot of the benefit, obviously, that was a big step from you having to go out and source that information. But a lot of our value add, I think, was on, like you said, the scrubbing and sort of the manicure of the list itself. And then we have the added pricing. And then over time, one of the things that Max and I did even after we launched was we continued to get feedback. And every time someone would email us and say, hey, this is great. Could you do this or could you do that? We did our best to try and turn that feature around in 24 hours, right? And, whatever it was, try and build it quickly and push it back out and say, hey, yeah, this is available. And so a lot of the features now, I would say 80% are almost crowdsourced in terms of their ideas, where they came from. And the idea is that we were building the app for the consumer. We weren't building it really for ourselves anymore, although we validated the ideas based on what we thought would be helpful in our business.
But what you know in your own business, this is what I learned when I started coaching that I didn't anticipate. I thought like coaching might just cost me like time, right? But when I started coaching people who are in other markets that I wasn't in, I started to learn the gotchas, the landmines, the due diligence that you got to do in the Southeast that you don't in the Southwest. And I started to learn how to value. It just kind of like it made me a way better investor having that line of sight into other markets. And same thing like with workflows, right? There's a different workflow for somebody that's cold calling versus direct mailing, or somebody that's targeting 50,000 and less properties, or somebody targeting way above, right? There's a different workflow. So I would think, yeah, that you're kind of getting input from people who have different workflows, and obviously throwing out the exceptions, but the stuff you hear more than once, right? It makes sense or is worth, implementing.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see because obviously, as we started to hear things that people would ask for, hey, I do this, can you add this? It was a lot of them were, like, oh yeah, we wouldn't have thought to do that. That's really cool, like, or because they're in a certain market or they have a certain experience or they have a certain strategy that warrants doing some, I wouldn't say niche, but some very specific action, whether it's looking at the legal description and trying to filter out in a certain way, or looking at the APN schemes or something like that. And so having, filters or tools that revolve around their workflow then not only kind of opens our eyes as the creators, but it might help other people be like, oh, that could be cool. Like I could try that, right? It, opens up new avenues for everyone.
Well, I know when some of the requests I made, you were like, that makes sense, but only about 1% of people are using it at that level. So like, it was almost like, do we have an advanced section where you log in with a different login and you got all the bells and whistles? Are we confusing people if we give them everything or too many filters? Are we overwhelming and confusing them, or are we helping them? Right. As always with software, the battle.
I definitely think we try and straddle that line. There are tools in our software even now that I would say are, definitely advanced user concepts, right? You look at, our pricing distribution configuration, right? Like understanding how an interquartile range functions when you're creating a distribution. Those are things that people have asked for, in terms of having control over the pricing model. But then, if you're not up to date on your statistics, it can be confusing, and it's hard to you want to balance the ability to be really easy to use, but also have those advanced toolings for those users.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things for us to keep going with is that from just like a normal manual process, we have people like, this is a good example with, they only want comps from a certain source or whatever. That's kind of like their confirmed source. But with us, and sometimes how the pricing and models work, more comps are better. And so sometimes what we see happen is that they only want certain comps to try to make it more accurate, but it actually does the opposite with our model. And so that's kind of one of the trickier parts that we deal with is, what are we giving them that actually kind of functions how they expect versus what do they expect, but it's basically a difference from what our model is actually doing. And so that's kind of one of the trickier things that we're like kind of on that line with, of giving them versus holding back, knowing that our model actually essentially does what they want it to do without them needing to do anything.
Well, there's that, like you said, that fine line or that balancing act of like getting user feedback and seeing what makes sense. But at the end of the day, understanding the bigger mission or what you're trying to accomplish. It's the Henry Ford, I'm going to butcher it here, but it's like paraphrasing the Henry Ford quote where he says, if I asked the people what they wanted at the time, they would have said faster horses. They didn't know they needed a car, right? There weren't cars out there yet. So if you ask the people, right, you guys know where the company's going, the direction, why, right? You're doing that. So you're looking for that user feedback. But at the same time, it's so interesting because when you're comping, when I use different listing MLS, different platforms, let's say like Zillow, Redfin, Land.com, Landflip, all these different ones. When I started doing that instead of just like one data source, that was actually where I started to identify like arbitrage opportunity even between platforms. So that's your next advanced thing there is show me like on Land.com if all the comps are low, but much higher on Zillow. Should I be buying right off market here and reselling over here, right? So you're absolutely right though, that the different, some platforms there aren't enough comps to accurately price it. But what you guys kind of have done, I mean, it's pretty darn bold, pretty ambitious to go, okay, well, we're going to take 3,000 plus counties And yeah, there's a ton of this with houses because it's easy. I mean, honestly, it's so easy with houses, right? Where we have the street addresses, the appraisals are closer. There's so many comps, so many platforms. But you guys said, yeah, I think we're going to try to create an algorithm that will put an estimate on every parcel of land. And then, like you said, where it kind of evolved was moving from approaching it at a county level, which I agree doesn't work, right? To, down to a geo level where you guys have schemes now, essentially different algorithms or pricing schemes where a land investor can say, hey, give me your estimated value based on at a county level or at a city level or down at that kind of geo level, just everything in really close proximity, right? Because those are different values.
Yeah, they can be.
Yeah,
They can be widely different, especially when you look at certain counties. I know like Maricopa County is probably a really good example where you have a really big chasm between sort of the urban development areas, sort of in the southeast area, and then you can keep going a little more southeast, and it's extremely desolate, right? It's just a desert out there.
Dude, that was going to be my example. Okay, I'm in Maricopa County. Okay, so Scottsdale, a 1 acre, you might see a listing $1 million for a 1 acre parcel.
Mm-hmm.
We come down to like the Gila River Reservation, right, which Maricopa butts up to. We might be able to pick up a 1 acre for, I don't know, 13, 15,000. So if we were pricing our 1 acre lots at the county level, there's such an incredible, obviously Maricopa is a huge county, right? Yeah. But the point is there's so much variance on a 1 acre lot across the county that doesn't work.
And then if you took that example at the city level, right, like Queen Creek, which is in Maricopa County, is sort of partially developed and partially farmland and partially desert, right? It's sort of on that transition state. And so you could get a parcel in Queen Creek that's extremely, valuable because it's closer to, say, Gilbert, right, or to Mesa. But then there's, some on the farther side that are still not developed, still not close. And so that's why I think that geo one really gets down to, okay, what's directly around me, within, depending on the size, if it's a 1 acre parcel within a couple of miles, like what's selling, what's recently sold, what's on the market there, and then analyzing that market as like its own segment.
Yeah. And so what is the geo, how far out are you looking at comps when you estimate the value of a property if somebody chooses your geo pricing scheme?
It depends on the size of the parcel, right? So the smaller the parcel, the tighter the radius will be. And then the larger ones, obviously, if it's 70 acres, we're going to have to go a little further out to find similar sized properties. You can also just get away with going out further just because usually when you have 70 acres, you're not having 70 acres right next to a bunch of quarter acre parcels. So usually everything's a little more spread out.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You're absolutely right. Just the mass size of some of these parcels. We're doing a 154 acre one right now up in Montana. So yeah, like you got to go, you know what I mean? You got to go pretty far to find comps when the property itself.
A recently sold 150 acres, can be hard to find sometimes within a mile.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So that kind of helps people understand the pricing scheme and what you're doing with that. Another thing you guys do that people might not be aware of is we're talking about pulling data kind of at a county level for marketing purposes, but you guys also have, and this is something that you guys have continued to add and improve upon this, but it is pulling an actual comp report specific to a property. So regardless of what data source somebody uses, right, to do their marketing, when a lead comes in, you guys have a kind of a la carte self-serve where you can pull a comp report. Why don't you just talk about that a little bit and share with everybody what that is?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an amazing tool for due diligence, right? So let's say you have a property that you want to look closer into, whether you're buying it or even putting it on the market or anything else. You can pull it by plugging in the state, county, and APN of a parcel. And you're going to just get a very comprehensive report of just a PDF file and also a KML map, which is compatible with Google Earth. So you can plug it in and see it on a map. But the PDF report is going to give you just public, information about the parcel. It's going to give you what we believe is the suggested market price of that property. And then we go into a lot of the details of what do the comps look like. So we'll show you statistics of the comps. We'll show you graphs of what the comps are. So you can kind of see trend lines. Maybe there's a difference between for sale comps and sold comps on there. And you can kind of get an idea of, okay, is this price really this, or is it a little lower? And so it's really meant for you to refine the pricing, but also get a feel for, is this property still of value, right? So we have a bunch of different things. We have property insights where we can show you what the soil looks like, what's the probability of the property perking. For those that are unaware of that, it's when there's no sewer and you need the soil to be able to absorb the excess water and everything that goes in. And so that's really important to know for building. We'll give you a topography breakdown of what the slope looks like across the property. And then we'll also show you what are the access points to the property, which is a big one. So it's obviously a lot harder when you don't have access to a property. So we can show you where those those access points are. So you can just get a good reading of everything, all the key metrics that you're looking for. And really, there's a ton of different things on there, as I'm sure you know. Like,
there's so many. I'm going to highlight a couple just in case.
Go for it.
It's like, this is not an exhaustive list. Well, let's do an exhaustive list, because there is so much cool stuff that you have. You provide like an agent table where you kind of give like suggested, agents, right, who are carrying listings, how many listings they have right now in close proximity with comps. You've got a subdivision price index, which is probably my favorite page on there, with the exception of the first page with the pricing, right, is where we can look at, and this only, it's not going to make sense at quarter acre or 5,000 square foot lots. Sure. But when we're looking at a larger acreage property, it gives us our price per acre at that level. But then you guys give a whole table of like, what's the price per acre if that were cut in half? And then if that were cut in half or a quarter. And that allows me to visually, assuming we got the initial subject property, we're close with the estimated value. I can go to that table and it kind of tells me, like, if I'm subdividing, if I cut these in half, is that going to double or almost double value? And if it doesn't, what if I continue cutting them down? What size do I need to be at for, to force enough appreciation with the subdivide? And that just saves a ton of time versus we used to manually do this in a Google sheet, right? And I would go out and get the comps and do my own math. But to be able to use that one page, tons of value there. I share that with a lot of people, that one, and then just the agents that are listed when somebody's looking for an agent, right? It's like they don't even realize that it's on within the comp report, right?
I was going to say, we have skip tracing, and some of the new features, Travis, I don't know if you've seen, since they're kind of buried in some of those other pages, is we have the sort of historical trends, right? So we have all of our comp data over the last 2-3 years, and you can kind of look at those pricing models as we've, analyzed them and see how that property is trending. We've recently added points of interest, right? So what are the key points of interest, in that nearby few mile vicinity to your property? Are there any grocery stores? Are you near a cemetery? Those kind of things. We also just recently added a flood zone. So we do a flood zone analysis, and we can kind of see what flood zones are your property and is required, the special flood hazard insurance, that kind of thing.
And then why don't you guys share or talk about something you added recently? That was the road access scrubbing, right? And this is part of, because road access is something we've always scrubbed post download, and it's something manual that we have our VAs living in the sheet for a week, right? To look up each property individually, on the map, and delete it out so we're not sending marketing to landlocked properties. But you guys fairly recently launched a road access filter, right? Kind of as an add-on.
It's awesome. I mean, again, all these things come from what do we want? What do the users want? What can make their process better? So like with the physical road access, I mean, as you know, or others know, when there's no road access to a property, it significantly reduces the value of it the majority of the time. And so if we're able to remove those on the front end instead of mailing them out, now we're saving a lot of costs and just dead leads, right? So what we were able to do after a lot of back end work on with Ryan and everything. So now all you do is check a box and we'll basically remove any properties that don't have road access or physical road access, I may include. So we don't check for easements there, but if it doesn't have physical road access, we will remove that from your final list. But with that being said, we don't just, delete it into the ether as well. We have another file that we move that into, so you can still view all of those properties. And what's cool with it is that we'll provide you with the WKT string of each property, which essentially is just the boundary coordinates of every property. Yeah. And so there's free websites out there that are just like WKT Viewer or whatever, some variant of that. And you can just copy and paste that basically the boundary coordinates, plug them in there, and you can actually then visually see those properties and confirm that they have road access. So it's really cool to see. Obviously, for the ones that do have road access, And then, but for the ones that don't, you can get a feel for, you can look at each one of those and see, okay, how close is it to a road? Is it possible that there could be an easement, or if I could get an easement, so it gives you the option to be able to go through that. And then along with that, for the properties that have road access, we'll actually show you the access points to them as well. So does it have one access point? Does it have two access points? How many are there? And we'll show you what they look like, which is just an amazing way to go about things. First of all, to confirm it has access, but then not only does it have access, but how many access points does it have, to just really get a feel for the road access characteristics of each parcel.
Well, and some of those features like that, right, are unique, or you're only able to offer that or do that if the data is being pulled from Price. Because this is another thing people might not be aware of, is you guys kind of have a bring your own data service, pricing where you can essentially grab your data from wherever you're used to pulling and are familiar with, and you can bring that, and if you have a Price membership, you can upload that and essentially append or price out the campaign, right?
Yeah, with that, we can add skip tracing data. We can provide a campaign map, which is, again, a KML file of your list, so you can see it on Google Earth. But yeah, some of the features, like the road access feature and the topography filter feature, like, and some other ones, it's just because of the information that's required for us to use for those filters, it has to be downloaded through us just for control purposes.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Not all data sources, even with land, like a lot of them, some of them don't even have the coordinates or anything like that, right?
Exactly. And that's where we come through. Not only do they not have the coordinates, but sometimes the ones that do have coordinates are wrong or incorrect coordinates that we found out, which is honestly the worst of the two, because now we provide people information, specifically pricing, that is not where the property is. And so that can kind of get into dangerous territories of, just mispricing an entire list, which we've seen happen before. So we always, obviously, we're going to say this, but we always recommend downloading the list directly from us, because we've vetted all the information, right? We have the quality control throughout that process. And like what you mentioned, it's not just the pricing, it's the filtering, it's the formatting, and just having a ready to send list, where a lot of people don't realize, again, land is a very incomplete data set. So when you download a list from us, we use Dejre as a provider. They don't typically always give us a lot of the city or zip code information for each property, just because it's not available. But what we'll do is look at the lat long information for each property and automatically add then geocode and add the zip code and city information to your list, so it's as complete as possible. So we do a lot of work as far as that goes, rearranging the names, adding reference numbers, and doing a lot of the work.
That's a big little one. Even that, just reference numbers itself, is something people have to manually create if your data source doesn't. So there's a ton. There's just, man, we could go so deep in the weeds that I'm going to tell people, if you go to the episode webpage for this podcast episode, we're going to link you to a mastermind that I recently did with Max and Ryan on Prycd, where and that is more like the tactical. Hey, we'll share your screen, show you where to click your mouse. Here's how to use these things, right? If this stuff is of interest to you and we can't explain it or show you really through the podcast, I would say go to the webpage, check out the mastermind replay to learn more about Prycd, as we kind of dive into all the filters and how to use those filters and kind of teach you how to do this. Hey, thanks, guys, man. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you coming on. Your tool, your software has had a big impact in our business. I share a case study all the time of a mailer I did, I forget, like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's like a 10 or 11,000 unit campaign where we ended up getting 3 properties and captured just over, 120 grand, in equity off of a campaign I did with you guys. And previously that would have taken me, I'm not going to say months, but it would have taken me a month or 6 weeks to price out the thing. And I just clicked the button, hit send, right? And, so yeah, it's a beautiful product, and I appreciate you guys, all the time and energy you've spent that goes into it, because we know you have these great ideas and then you start these things, and especially software, right? Then comes the fun part of actually supporting them. So, right. So I really appreciate you guys' time, man, and got a 2-for-1. Thanks for both of you making it on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. We really appreciate it as well.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning into The King Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to travisking.com for show notes, resources, bonus content, and more ways to connect with me and the guests that you hear on the show. Remember, greatness is already within you. It's time for you to boss up and claim it. Stop building someone else's empire and start building your own.